What if I told you it was never about the plane's safety, but about something much simpler and more human, like the annoying sound of interference? We've all heard the warning. Please turn on airplane mode. But have you ever wondered what would happen if you didn't? Would the plane crash? Would communications be cut off? Is it a law, a recommendation, or just a pointless habit? The story of airplane mode doesn't begin with an accident or a media scandal, but with a mix of caution and uncertainty. At the end of the 20th century, when mobile devices started becoming part of everyday life, a reasonable question arose. Can these new signals interfere with the delicate technology of an airplane? The first reports mentioned strange buzzing sounds in pilots' headsets. Others mentioned that, during takeoff, certain navigation equipment seemed to behave erratically. A direct connection was never confirmed, but just a possibility was enough to raise alarms. That's how the unwritten rule was born, which later became a regulation: devices off or in airplane mode during the flight. But the reality was more nuanced. The systems of a commercial airplane are designed with layers of protection and electromagnetic shielding. In other words, even with dozens of cell phones turned on, the likelihood of a catastrophe is practically zero. What is true, and still happens in 2025, is that some phones generate an interference buzz in the pilot's communication systems, similar to the typical noise we used to hear on a radio when someone got a call nearby. It's not dangerous, but it is annoying, especially during critical moments of the flight, like takeoff or landing, when any distraction can be a problem. And since not all devices are the same or up to date, and not all passengers are tech-savvy, a universal solution was chosen, asking everyone to turn on airplane mode. Can you imagine flying over the Atlantic, watching your favorite series on Netflix while sending messages on WhatsApp without turning anything off? Well, it's not some futuristic fantasy. It's already a reality, at least in some countries. So why do they still ask us to turn on airplane mode? In recent years, technology inside airplanes has evolved by leaps and bounds. What used to be simple radio and navigation systems are now true digital hubs capable of processing thousands of signals without any problem. The European Union, for example, has already allowed the use of 5G networks during flights for some time now. So, what's the point of still using airplane mode? This is where something important comes into play: standardization. Not all countries, not all airlines, and not all devices are on the same level. What might work perfectly on a short-haul European flight isn't necessarily feasible on an intercontinental flight that passes through different airspaces and regulatory standards. There's also an operational aspect to consider. Imagine 200 passengers making calls, receiving messages, and downloading videos all at the same time. Beyond the technical capacity, the atmosphere in the cabin would become chaotic. Airlines try to avoid this chaos by limiting the use of mobile functions while in the air. And even though many of the rules are no longer based on any real danger, they are followed as part of a culture of preventive safety. In other words, if something can be avoided to reduce risks or inconveniences, even if they're minimal, it's better to take that precaution. In that sense, airplane mode remains a practical, simple, and effective tool. In fact, in interviews with pilots and aviation experts, most of them agree on the same thing. It's no longer about technical safety, but rather about operability and the flight experience. Did you know that your cell phone, flying above the clouds, can affect cell towers that are hundreds of kilometers below? This isn't science fiction. In fact, this is one of the most real reasons why airplane mode is still necessary, even if the plane is shielded against any interference. When we think about possible interference, it's logical to imagine that the risk is inside the plane. But what few people know is that the bigger problem lies in how phones interact with the cellular network on the ground. Here's a simple metaphor. Imagine that your phone, when airplane mode isn't activated, goes into desperation mode, since it can't find a stable nearby signal. Because you're flying at 900 kilometers per hour and over 10,000 meters high, it starts searching for every cell tower it can pick up. And in the air, that means dozens, sometimes hundreds. At that altitude, the phone can detect multiple antennas at the same time, and what would normally be a clean connection turns into a swarm of simultaneous requests to different towers. The result? An overload of the terrestrial cellular system. The network tries to process your erratic signal, constantly switching towers, redirecting data, all while you're completely outside its logical coverage area. This not only makes the phone work unnecessarily hard, draining the battery and overheating, but it also creates unnecessary noise on the network that can affect the quality of service for users who are actually on the ground, using their phones normally. Several telecommunications experts have been warning about this phenomenon for years. It's not something that will cause a collapse, but it is a technical nuisance that can be avoided with a simple action: turning on airplane mode. Airplane mode isn't just for flying. It's a button that, when used well, can give you something more valuable than any Wi-Fi: peace of mind. Have you ever felt exhausted, distracted, or like your phone is about to explode from the heat? Maybe all you needed was to turn on airplane mode. For years, we saw it as a useless feature unless you were actually on a plane. But today, airplane mode has become a personal tool for disconnecting, saving energy, and even digital security. Let's start with the most tangible thing, the battery. When your phone enters an area with low coverage, like a basement, a hospital, or somewhere far from the city, the device struggles to find a signal. How does it do that? By searching non-stop, jumping from one antenna to another, increasing its transmission power, and recalculating its location. That invisible struggle is what drains your battery at full speed, even when you're not actively using your phone. Turning on airplane mode at those times interrupts that constant search and stabilizes your device's performance. And if you're charging it at the same time, your phone charges much faster and without overheating. But that's not all. There's also the mental and emotional side. We live hyper-connected. Notifications, emails, messages, alerts, ads. Every vibration is a little interruption. Airplane mode gives you an invisible barrier, a voluntary pause to focus, rest, or simply be present. Many professionals use it in important meetings, during meditation, or even while sleeping, because beyond just turning off the phone, activating airplane mode gives you the peace of mind that nothing will get through, but everything will still be there when you turn it off. And if we talk about privacy, things get even more interesting. By disconnecting all signals, cellular, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, the phone becomes practically invisible to any attempt at tracking or external connection. This is especially useful when you're in public places, on open Wi-Fi networks, or you just want to maintain a minimum level of digital protection. Want a practical example? Imagine you're in a taxi and you need to use GPS, but you don't need to receive calls or notifications. You can turn on airplane mode and then manually enable only Wi-Fi or GPS. That way, you control exactly what's on and what's not, without relying on the operating system. Some people think airplane mode is doomed to disappear. But what if I told you that not only is it here to stay, but it could actually become one of the smartest features on your phone? Because the future isn't about disconnecting, it's about choosing how and when you connect. With the rise of 5G networks, onboard satellite Wi-Fi, and increasingly smarter devices, many people wonder if airplane mode's days are numbered. The truth is, it's not going to disappear, it's going to evolve. Airlines are already shifting to a new connectivity model where you can send messages, browse the internet, and even make video calls during the flight. They do this thanks to systems that operate on dedicated frequencies, with no risk of interference. In Europe, for example, regulations already allow planes to have mini 5G antennas on board. This means you could keep your phone in normal mode without it being a problem. But there's a key nuance. Connectivity no longer depends solely on your device, but also on the environment around it. And this is where the new role of airplane mode comes in. Instead of being a switch that turns everything off, it could become a smart connectivity manager. Imagine that when you activate it, it gives you options. Do you want to disconnect only the mobile network, keep Wi-Fi on, mute notifications, enter focus mode, or switch to rest mode? In other words, it's not about shutting off the digital world, but about taking control. Even outside of airplanes, airplane mode can be integrated with personal habits. You can use it to trigger sleep, study, or focus routines, or simply to set boundaries in a world that rarely respects them. And the more aware we are of our attention and our privacy, the more it makes sense to have a button that, with a single tap, brings us back to silence, calm, or at least gives us the choice. So the next time someone tells you, turn on airplane mode, don't just think about the plane. Think about what it means to disconnect intentionally, to protect your attention, your privacy, and your battery. And now tell me, do you use it only on flights or also in your daily life? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to read it. And if this video helped you see airplane mode in a new light, share it. You never know who might need that little break you're giving them.